I spent a long stretch of time studying 30 people who were all trying to manifest money. Not casually, seriously. People who knew the teachings, who had read Neville, who affirmed and visualized and did the practices. 30 people aimed at the same goal, using the same law, all convinced they were doing it right. And what I found was so consistent, so clean, that it changes everything about how you should approach this. Of those 30, 27 were failing, not because they lacked discipline, not because they were lazy. They were failing because of one single thing they were all doing, the exact same mistake, running quietly through 27 different lives. And the 3 who were succeeding were not doing more than the others. They were doing less. They had simply stopped the one thing the other 27 could not stop. Let me tell you what that one thing is, because once you see it in yourself, you cannot pretend anymore. The 27 were all, in their own way, checking, monitoring. They would do the practice, assume the wealth, feel it for a while, and then they would turn to the outer world and check whether it had worked yet. They would look at the account. They would scan their life for signs. In 100 small anxious ways they would ask, is it happening? And every time they checked, they undid the assumption they had just made. Because checking is an act of doubt. You do not check on what you know. You only check on what you are afraid is not there. Their checking was a running confession of lack, and the law faithfully returned the lack they kept confessing. The 3 did not check. That was the whole difference. When I looked closely at what set them apart, it was not a better technique, not a longer meditation, not a more detailed vision board. They had made a decision and then behaved as though the decision were already reality, and they did not go back to the outer world for confirmation. They assumed the money and then they lived calmly, as if it were done. They did not stand over the pot every 5 minutes lifting the lid to see if it had boiled. And because they never lifted the lid, it boiled. That is the entire lesson. If you take one thing from this, take that. The checking is the leak. Stop checking and you stop the leak. Let me go deeper, because understanding why the checking happens is what lets you actually stop. The 27 were not stupid. They checked because a part of them did not truly believe. And they did not truly believe because they were treating manifestation as a bet, a gamble, a thing that might or might not pay off. When you place a bet, you watch to see if you won. That watching is baked into the psychology of betting. But manifestation is not a bet you are testing. It is an assumption you are living from. And an assumption by its nature does not get checked, because it is not in question. You do not wake up and check whether the sun rose. You do not check whether your hands are still attached. Those assumptions are so total that checking would be absurd. That is the state you have to bring to money, and the 27 never reached it because a part of them was always still betting. Watch how this plays out in a single day of a person who is failing. They wake up and do a morning affirmation. I am wealthy. Money flows to me easily. Good. For about 90 seconds they occupy the state. Then they pick up their phone, see a bill notification, and the whole thing collapses. Fear floods in. The old assumption of lack reasserts itself with far more force than the 90-second affirmation ever had. They spend the rest of the day in low-grade money anxiety, checking balances, doing mental math, worrying about the month. That night, exhausted, they do another affirmation and wonder why the morning one did not take. It did not take because it was 90 seconds of wealth against 16 hours of lack. The dominant state won, and the dominant state was fear. Now watch a day of one of the 3. They also assume wealth in the morning, but they do not treat it as a fragile spell that a single bill can shatter. When the bill arrives, they look at it with a strange detachment, almost boredom. Of course they think the old reality is still delivering its old echoes. That is expected. That is not my concern. They give it exactly as much attention as it needs and no more. They do not let it touch their state. Their assumption of wealth is not a 90-second event. It is a resting background condition, a low steady hum underneath the whole day, unbothered by contradicting evidence. And because their state is stable, their results become stable. That is the difference between a flickering signal and a steady broadcast. The world can only lock onto a steady broadcast. Here is something important about the 27. Their failure did not look like checking to them. They did not think, I am checking too much. They thought they were being responsible, being realistic, staying on top of their finances, keeping their eye on the ball. The mistake was wearing the mask of a virtue. That is what makes it so hard to catch. The very behavior that feels responsible, monitoring your progress, is the behavior that dismantles the manifestation. You have been trained your whole life that watching your money carefully is wise. And in the ordinary world of pure effort, maybe it is. But in the world of assumption, that same watchfulness is a poison, because watchfulness assumes there is something to worry about, and that assumption of worry is what materializes. The three had become, by ordinary standards, almost irresponsible. They stopped anxiously watching, and that was their freedom. The checking had a partner, and I have to name it because the two worked together. The 27 talked about it. They processed their manifestation out loud. They told friends what they were trying to manifest. They discussed whether it was working. They joined groups and posted about their journey, their doubts, their small wins, their frustrating plateaus. And every one of those conversations kept the goal in the state of trying rather than done. When you talk constantly about manifesting money, you reinforce that you do not have it yet, that it is still a project, still unfinished. The three were quiet. They did not broadcast their process. They held it privately like a secret already accomplished and let the results do the talking. There is real power in that silence, and the noise of the 27 was leaking their power the entire time. If you recognize yourself in the 27, and most people watching this will, pause and be honest about which one you are. Are you assuming or betting and then checking? Are you living from the end or monitoring the middle? Are you holding it in quiet certainty or broadcasting your struggle to everyone who will listen? That honesty is uncomfortable, but it is the doorway. You cannot fix a leak you refuse to see, and if you want the exact daily structure the three lived by, the one that keeps you out of the checking trap in the first place, I left the resource that lays it out in the pinned comment. It walks through the whole thing step by step. Go read it, then come back, because now I'm going to show you exactly how to become one of the three. The move from the 27 to the 3 is not gradual. It is a decision, and then a discipline that guards the decision. The decision is this: you decide once that the money is already yours, not that it will be, that it is. You make it the way you would decide your own name with total finality, and then you refuse to reopen the question. Every time your mind tries to reopen it, every time it asks, but is it really, you treat that question the way you would treat a question about whether your name is really your name. You do not engage it. You do not argue. You simply decline the doubt because the matter is settled. Settled is the word. The 27 kept everything unsettled, perpetually open, perpetually in question. The 3 settled it and got on with their lives. Now the discipline that guards the decision. The first rule you already know: do not check. When the urge to look at your account in a spirit of anxiety comes, and it will come many times a day out of old habit, you catch it and refuse it, not because checking is forbidden in some rigid way, but because you understand what checking does. You are no longer willing to pay the price of resetting your assumption for the small relief of looking. You would rather sit in the dark and certain than have proof and be anxious. This alone, held for a few weeks, transforms people. The nervous system, no longer fed anxiety about money several times a day, starts to relax into the new assumption, and the outer world starts quietly to shift. The second rule is to guard your speech. You stop narrating lack. You stop telling the story of your struggle. When money comes up, you either say nothing or you speak from ease. You never again perform your poverty out loud for the sympathy or the venting or the processing. This is hard, because complaining about money is one of the most bonded activities humans do. Everyone does it. It feels normal, even intimate, to sit with a friend and lament how tight things are. But every time you do it, you vote for lack with emotional conviction, and the vote counts. The 3 did not join the collective ritual of money complaint. They opted out. And opting out of that ritual is one of the quietly powerful things you can do for your finances. The third rule is to feel the end as present, daily, not as a performance, but as a residence. You do not visit the feeling of wealth for 90 seconds and leave. You move in. You let the calm of being provided for become your baseline emotional address. Through the day, in ordinary moments, waiting in line, walking, sitting, you gently return to the felt sense of already having enough, of money being a solved problem, of that particular loosening in the body that comes when survival is handled. You are not straining to believe it. You are choosing again and again to occupy the state of the person for whom it is already true. That is what the 3 did without fully naming it. Their default emotional state was that of someone already wealthy, and reality organized itself around that default. Let me handle the fear that comes up when people hear this. If I stop checking and stop worrying and stop working so hard at it, won't I go passive? Won't I miss opportunities? Won't I neglect my real responsibilities? That fear assumes anxiety is what makes you functional. That worry is what keeps you sharp. It is a lie. Anxiety does not make you effective. It makes you reactive, scattered, and prone to bad decisions made from fear. The three were not passive. They took action, sometimes bold action. But their action came from a settled, certain state, which made it clear, well-timed, and free of desperation. Action from certainty looks like ease and produces results. Action from anxiety looks like frantic effort and produces exhaustion. Dropping the anxiety did not make them do less that mattered. It made everything they did more effective because it flowed from a mind that was not at war with itself. There was another pattern in the 27 I have to warn you about, because it is subtle and it wears the mask of spirituality. They were addicted to seeking, always looking for the next technique, the next teacher, the next method, the missing piece that would finally make it click. They had consumed enormous amounts of manifestation content, far more than the three, and their results were worse. Why? Because the seeking was itself a form of checking. Every new method they tried was an admission that the last one had failed, which is an admission of lack, which produces lack. The three were not seekers. They learned the simple law, and then they stopped consuming and started living it. At some point, you have to close the books and simply assume. The endless student never graduates to wealth because studying wealth is not the same as assuming it, and the 27 had confused the two. Sit for a second with how simple the actual mechanism is, because your mind will fight the simplicity. It will insist that something this important must be complicated, must require more, must have a catch. That resistance is the old identity trying to keep you in the seeking loop where it feels safe. But the truth stays simple. Decide it is done. Stop checking, stop narrating lack. Live from the feeling of the end. Guard that state against contradicting evidence. That is it. That is what the three did. There is no missing piece. It feels like there must be more because the simple version asks you to actually change your inner state and hold it, which is harder than learning a new technique, even though it sounds easier. Techniques are easy to collect and never apply. State is hard to hold, and it is the only thing that works. Let me give you a concrete picture of what holding the state looks like when the world tests you, because it will. You have made your decision, you have stopped checking, you are living from the end. And then a real financial blow lands, an unexpected expense, a loss, a number that drops hard. This is the moment that separated the 27 from the three most clearly. When the blow landed, the 27 took it as proof. See, it is not working. Look at this. I knew it. And in taking it as proof, they reassumed lack at full force and reset everything. When a blow landed on one of the three, they did something almost strange. They refused to read it as meaningful. This is the old momentum, they thought, the old reality finishing its arc. It has nothing to do with what is coming. They did not let the blow rewrite their assumption. They held the course through the contradiction, and the contradiction passed, and the new reality arrived on schedule. This refusal to be moved by contradicting evidence is the master skill. Develop it, and everything else works. Because the outer world will always show you the old reality for a while after you change your inner state. There is a lag. The echo of your old assumption is still traveling back to you even after you have changed the sound. During that lag, everything looks like failure. The 27 quit during the lag every time because they read the lag as a verdict. The three understood the lag was just the old echo arriving late, and they waited it out in calm certainty. If you can hold your assumption steady through the stretch where there is no evidence, and even contrary evidence, you get everything. If you cannot, you quit at the exact moment you are about to break through, like the 27 over and over. Let me take you deeper into what the three actually did on the inside, because it goes further than checking, and the deeper layers are where the real change lives. The three had a fundamentally different relationship with their own imagination. To the 27, imagination was a nice tool, a place to visualize, a mental exercise they did, and then set aside as they returned to real life. To the three, imagination was real life, the more real of the two. Whether they used these words or not, they understood that the inner world is the causal world and the outer world is its report. So when they imagined wealth, they were not doing an exercise and hoping it would leak into reality. They were doing the actual work of creation in the actual place where creation happens and treating the outer world as the delayed printout it is. That changes how seriously you take your inner scenes. The 27 visualized casually, half-heartedly, one eye on whether it was working, treating the visualization as a request submitted to the universe for approval. The 3 occupied their inner scenes with total conviction, not as requests but as facts, and then walked away the way you walk away from a task already completed. They did not visualize and then anxiously await a response. They built the inner reality, felt it as done, and returned to their day carrying the quiet certainty of someone who has already handled the matter. The visualization was not a petition, it was an act of completion, and completed things are not checked on, they are simply lived from. There was a specific inner conversation running in the 3 that the 27 did not have, and you can adopt it. The 27's inner monologue about money was a running commentary of worry, calculation, and doubt. Can I afford this? What if it does not work? Why is it taking so long? Look at how little I have. That monologue ran under everything, a constant undertone of scarcity narrating the whole day. The 3 had a different monologue, one of quiet, assumed sufficiency. It is handled. I am provided for. It is already on its way. This is just the old reality finishing its arc. The words matter less than the tone, and the tone was that of a person who has already won, calmly waiting for the scoreboard to update. Your inner monologue about money is running right now, whether you notice it or not, and it is either the monologue of the 27 or the monologue of the 3. There is no neutral setting. Every hour it presses one assumption or the other into your subconscious. Now let me face the biggest objection the 27 raised, the one that kept them stuck, because you are probably raising it too. But I have to be realistic, they said. I cannot just pretend I have money when I do not. That would be delusional, irresponsible, a way to ignore my real problems and end up in a worse spot. It sounds so wise, so grounded, that it is almost impossible to argue with on its own terms, which is exactly why it is so good at keeping people poor. Here is the flaw. Being realistic means matching your inner state to your current outer conditions. But your current conditions are the product of your past inner state, so being realistic means chaining your future to your past. It means using the results of your old assumptions as the mandatory template for your new ones, which guarantees your future can only repeat your past. In the domain of manifestation, realism is a sophisticated machine for staying exactly where you are forever. The 3 were, by the standards of the 27, unrealistic. They assumed wealth their current conditions did not justify. They felt provided for when the numbers said otherwise. They held certainty without external evidence, and that unrealism was precisely their power, because it let them break the loop where the past dictates the future. They were not ignoring their real problems. They were refusing to let those problems define their inner state, because they understood the inner state is what produces the next set of conditions. The realist looks at the low number, matches their state to it, and produces another low number. The 3 looked at the low number, refused to match their state to it, held wealth instead, and produced a rising number. Same starting point, opposite relationship to it, opposite outcome. Let me give you a fuller picture of the interval, that gap between assuming wealth and seeing it, because navigating it separated the 3 from everyone else. When the 3 assumed wealth, nothing changed immediately in the outer world. Of course it did not. There is always a lag, and in that lag, the 27 consistently broke because it felt like failure, felt like proof that nothing was happening, felt like the emptiness would go on forever. The 3 related to the lag completely differently. They understood it was not empty. During the interval, the inner assumption was hardening. The subconscious was accepting the new state. Reality was beginning, invisibly, to reorganize. They did not need to see it, to trust it. They treated the interval the way a farmer treats winter, not as evidence the crop failed, but as the necessary season before the harvest when the important work happens underground, out of sight. The 27 kept digging up the field in winter to check and lost the crop. The 3 left the field alone and trusted the season. This trust in the unseen is the hardest thing to build and the most important, so here is how you build it. You act consistently as though the unseen work is real even when you cannot perceive it. You hold the assumption, refuse to check, decline to be moved by the lag, not because you can see it working, but because you have decided to trust the mechanism regardless of visible evidence. And here is what happens. Over time, you get a result. Something shifts. Money arrives in some form. That first result, produced by your trust in the unseen, becomes evidence you can lean on next time. Each time you hold through the interval and get a result, your trust deepens until the interval no longer frightens you at all, because you have crossed it enough times to know it always ends in harvest. The 27 never built that trust because they never made it across the interval even once. They always quit in the middle. The 3 made it across once, and after that they were free. Let me describe the texture of the 3's daily experience, because it was not what the 27 imagined winning would feel like. The 27 pictured that once they were manifesting correctly, they would feel excited, high, buzzing with anticipation, watching eagerly as the money rolled in. That is not what the 3 felt. The 3 felt calm, almost boring. A quiet, settled, unremarkable certainty, like the certainty you feel about facts too obvious to get worked up over. They were not buzzing with anticipation, because anticipation is a state of not yet having, and they were living in the state of already having, which is calm, not excited. This is a crucial and counterintuitive point. If your manifestation practice keeps you in a state of excited anticipation, you are still in wanting, still in the 27. The 3 had moved past wanting into having, and having feels like calm, like ease, like a solved problem you have stopped thinking about. Aim for the calm, not the excitement. The calm is the signature of a completed assumption. There is one more pattern that trapped the 27, and it is the most spiritual sounding, which makes it the most disguised. Several of them were caught in the deserving trap. Underneath, they believed they did not deserve the money yet, that they had to earn it first through more inner work, more healing, more clearing of blocks, more becoming worthy. So they were perpetually working on themselves, perpetually not yet ready, perpetually one more healing session away from abundance. And that deserving trap was just another form of lack, another way of assuming not yet, another reason to keep the money in the future. The 3 did not believe they had to deserve it. They understood that abundance is not a reward for worthiness, but a natural result of assumption, available to anyone who assumes it, whatever their level of inner healing. They did not wait to be worthy. They assumed, let the assumption work, and the money came to them in their unhealed, imperfect, ordinary state, because the law does not check your worthiness. It checks your assumption. If you are waiting to deserve wealth before you assume it, you will wait forever, because the waiting is itself the assumption of not yet, and not yet is what you will keep getting. There was also a difference in how the 3 received money when it came, and this matters because how you receive shapes what comes next. When money came to the 27, in the small amounts it sometimes did, they received it with a kind of grasping relief, clutching it, immediately worrying about whether more would come, treating each arrival as a scarce event to be anxious about. That grasping reception was itself an assumption of scarcity, and it choked the flow. The 3 received differently. Calm expectation, as the natural and unsurprising result of their assumption, neither grasping nor anxious. Of course, more where that came from. That relaxed, of course, kept the channel open and told reality that more was normal and expected. How you receive teaches reality how to keep sending. Receive with grasping scarcity, and you signal money is rare. Receive with calm expectation, and you signal money is abundant and ongoing. The 3 received like the wealthy, and so the wealth continued. So as you decide to leave the 27 and join the 3, understand it is a total shift, not a partial one. It is not enough to stop checking while keeping the anxious inner monologue, not enough to hold the assumption while secretly believing you do not deserve it, not enough to feel excited anticipation and call it certainty. The 3 had aligned all of it: the checking, the monologue, the deserving, the reception, the relationship to the interval, all pointing the same way, all broadcasting the single consistent signal of already having. That consistency, that absence of any leak in any direction, is what made them magnetic to money. You are aiming for that same total consistency. Every leak you seal, every contradiction you resolve, every place where you stop broadcasting lack, moves you closer to the 3, and the money closer to you. The 27 were not cursed. They were not less worthy. They were caught in a loop of checking and worrying and seeking that they mistook for effort, And that loop quietly cancelled their manifestation every single day. The three were not gifted. They had just stopped the loop. That is the entire secret of the study. Stop the loop, settle the matter, live from the end, refuse the contradiction, and let the money arrive last, as evidence, not as permission. You do not need permission. You need a decision and the discipline to protect it. Make the decision now, then guard it like your life depends on it, because your wealth does. Let me put two of them side by side, one from each group because the contrast makes the whole thing concrete. Two people, similar situations, similar debts, both wanting more money. The first one of the 27, treated it like a project. Every morning an affirmation, every afternoon a check of the account, every evening a recap with a friend about whether anything had shifted. Vision board updated, new method downloaded, progress tracked in a journal. Enormous effort, all of it a running broadcast of not yet. Months in, exhausted, still broke, and convinced the law had failed. The second one of the three, did almost nothing you could point to. Decided the money was handled. Stopped checking, stopped talking about it. Went about their life with a quiet, almost boring certainty. Months in, money had come, sideways, from a direction they had not planned, and when it came, they were not even surprised. The difference was not effort. The first one worked harder at manifesting than the second one ever did. The difference was that one was performing lack all day, and the other had quietly assumed the end and left it alone. I want to say something about the setbacks, because both of them faced them, and the setbacks are where the two groups reveal themselves completely. Both hit a rough month. Both had a bill land that they did not expect. For the one from the 27, that bill was a verdict. It confirmed every fear, reset the assumption, and sent them spiraling back into the checking and the worrying and the seeking, looking for the method that would finally rescue them. For the one from the 3, the same kind of bill was just weather, something to be handled and then forgotten, with no power to touch the underlying certainty that they were provided for. Same event. One let it rewrite their entire state, the other let it pass through without a mark. And that, more than any technique, is what separated the outcome. Not what happened to them, how they held their state when it happened. You will get your own version of that bill. When it lands, you will find out in that exact moment which of the two you have become. If this named something you have been doing without realizing, tell me in the comments which of the 27 habits you are dropping today, the checking, the complaining, or the endless seeking. Naming it out loud is the first act of leaving it behind. And the resource that lays out the full daily structure the 3 lived by is waiting in the pinned comment, so go read it if you want the whole thing and not just the idea. Subscribe, because next I'm going to show you how your manifestation quietly resets itself every single day and how to stop it. You came here to learn why 27 out of 30 fail. Now you know. The only question left is which number you are going to be.